I should have known something was off the moment Mrs. Whitmore raised an eyebrow at my shoes. We were in the grand ballroom of the Astoria Hotel, crystal chandeliers, ornate moldings, the kind of place that whispered tradition with every polished handrail. My daughter Emily, the bride, looked ethereal in her lace gown, the sort that made grown men gasp. But as I hovered near the edge of the receiving line, greeting a tidal wave of guests, Mrs. Whitmore, mother of the groom, paused before me, lips pursed. "Oh, you must be Annette's mother," she said, her voice sweet and a touch brittle. She flipped through a mental Rolodex of educated small talk. "Emily's so refined. I'm curious, what is it you do, dear?" I held my breath. "I'm a paralegal at Shepherd and Dean," I replied, smiling. The firm wasn't a corporate titan, but I earned my living reviewing contracts, drafting motions, and helping people navigate the justice system. It was honest, respectable work, but apparently not prestigious enough for Mrs. Whitmore. She lifted a gloved hand to her perfectly coiffed hair. "A paralegal," she repeated as if testing the word for sound. "How unusual." Then her eyes drifted over my modest dress, my scuffed heels. "And where did you study, dear? Harvard? Oxford?" I laughed to keep the tremor out of my voice. "I never had the chance to go to university," I said. "I took night classes and have been working since I was 18. "Oh, so you're what?" Her tone sharpened. "Low educated." The words hit me like a slap. I forced my face to stay neutral, to keep the celebratory mood afloat. Behind me, a priest was his own receiving line, nodding through the crowd. Emily's new husband, Michael, her college sweetheart, stood a few feet away, smiling stiffly at relatives. I rose on tiptoe, lowered my voice. "Education comes in many forms, Mrs. Whitmore. I've learned more from life than most do in lecture halls." Then I turned for just a moment to catch Emily's eye. She looked radiant until she saw the anger flash across my face. Earlier that day, I'd driven Emily to the salon in my old SUV, reminiscing about the girl she once was, the 5-year-old with paint-splattered pajamas, who declared she'd be a space lawyer when she grew up, and the awkward teenager whose homemade prom dress looked like a Picasso. I'd picked out her high school scholarships, held her trembling hand on her first day at community college, and celebrated every certificate she earned, because although I hadn't graduated college myself, I believed deeply in education. "Mom," she'd said, when I asked if she regretted leaving school for work, "I don't care where I study, I just care that I learn something every day. You taught me that." That was true. I'd worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat after Dad left. I'd paid my way through night school, parking my textbooks next to me, on late flights to my second shift at the supermarket checkout. I'd been tired, gazed at empty classrooms when I couldn't afford the full tuition, but I'd learned. And I'd taught Emily. Yet here I was, hours later, sneered at as uneducated. I straightened my back, took a deep breath, and returned to the line. The next guest stepped forward. Aunt Muriel, Michael's great-aunt, a frail woman wrapped in mink. She peered at me through tiny spectacles. "Annette, dear," she said, her voice quavering, "I heard about your unfortunate educational history. How did Emily ever turn out so accomplished?" I blinked, startled by her candor. "She's her own woman, Aunt Muriel," I said softly. "Her achievements are hers alone." Muriel's lips thinned. "Yes, but without a degree, what can you teach her, really?" Unable to contain myself, I leaned closer. "Life, Aunt Muriel. I teach her life." I smiled, deliberately kind. "And that's worth more than any diploma." She puffed out a breath. "Well," she turned and shuffled on. I watched her join the rest of the guests, who gossiped in small clusters, parents in pearls, uncles in crisp suits, school friends swirling champagne, and felt my chest tighten. When Emily finally took the floor for her speech, the room hushed. She stood at the center, microphone in hand, the soft ivory of her dress glowing. All eyes, hundreds of them, were on her. I sat at a table strewn with half-eaten salmon, undercooked risotto, and wilted centerpieces. "My mom," Emily began, voice clear and steady, "has taught me more in my 19 years than anyone else." Her gaze swept the ballroom, until it landed squarely on Mrs. Whitmore and Aunt Muriel. "She taught me that hard work is its own reward, that education is not solely earned with a student ID, and that integrity matters more than a gilded resume." A murmur rippled around the room. I sat forward, heart pounding. This was the moment she'd hinted at earlier. "Stay tuned," she'd whispered over breakfast. "I know some of you have your own views of education," she continued. "But I ask you to consider this. My mother has been my greatest teacher. She taught me to stand up for myself, to speak out when something is unjust. For that, I am forever grateful. At that, she turned to me, her eyes glistening. Then, in a voice that rang like a bell, she said, "Mom, would you do me the honor of teaching us all something right now?" A gasp ran through the audience. I stood, confusion knotting my stomach. She handed the mic to me. Every eye widened. Mrs. Whitmore's jaw dropped. Aunt Muriel clicked her tongue. I took the microphone, my hands trembling. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, and my own voice surprised me. Calm, strong. "I will teach you one lesson, extracted from years of scrimping, striving, and sometimes falling flat." I paused, surveyed the crowd. It's this: never underestimate a woman's education, no matter how she earned it. A ripple of applause started at our table, grew across the room. I continued. Education isn't only found in ivory towers. It's found in kitchens where bills are paid on time, in assembly lines where skills are honed, in night classes, library corners, and life's unexpected challenges. Judge a woman by her heart, her actions, her resilience, not by a cap or gown. Heads nodded. Some guests stood. Others wiped tears. A few mouths hung open, especially the Whitmores. I closed with, "To my daughter, may you always learn and grow." And to everyone else, "Open your minds before your mouths." Then I handed the mic back to Emily, who embraced me, turned to face the crowd, and said simply, "That's my mom." The rest of the night blurred. Champagne toasts, tear-stained faces, and one by one, even Mrs. Whitmore approached me. Her posture stiff as a schoolmarm, she extended a gloved hand. "Mrs. Becker," she said quietly, "I apologize." I took her hand. "Thank you," I replied. "But I hope you'll remember that kindness and respect are lessons we can all use more of." She nodded, eyes downcast. "Yes, thank you." Later, long after the music and laughter faded, Emily and I sat in the empty ballroom, collecting scattered programs. The buffet tables were bare. The DJ's booth stood cold. The clean-up crew moved in ghostly rows. "I knew I could do it," I said softly. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "You did more than that, Mom," she whispered. "You taught them and me." I kissed her hair. "Happy wedding day, sweetheart." She grinned. "The best lesson ever." At home the next morning, tea in hand, I scrolled through the dozens of congratulatory emails and social media posts. Powerful speech. She nailed it. Mother of the Year. But most importantly, I saw a private message from Mrs. Whitmore. "You opened my eyes. Thank you for your wisdom." My heart swelled. I closed the laptop, glanced at my modest collection of diplomas and certificates on the wall. GD, paralegal certification, night class transcripts, all reminders of my journey. And I thought of the day's lessons, not confined to lectures, but one through life itself. Education, real education, I realized isn't measured by letters after your name, but by the courage to stand up, speak out, and change hearts. And that, at my daughter's wedding, I and she did the unthinkable. We rewrote the narrative, in front of everyone who needed to learn it. And no gown or cap could have bestowed a more valuable degree. The ballroom was empty now, the last of the cleanup crew, shuffling away into the evening. Emily and I gathered up the leftover programs, our laughter echoing off the vaulted ceiling as we reminisced. But as we slipped into the quiet of the hotel corridor, I could feel the weight of what had happened settle on my shoulders. This lesson, born in the heat of wounded pride, was far from over. "I can't believe how everyone reacted," Emily whispered, folding a glossy invitation in half. Some of Aunt Muriel's friends were actually crying. I squeezed her hand. "Your speech cut through the pretense." They saw what mattered. We reached the elevator and rode down in silence to the lobby, where bellhops propped open the doors, and the last taxi was loading. Outside, the night air was cool and smelled of wet pavement. Cars honked, neon signs flickered. We climbed into my SUV, the seats still warm from the afternoon heat. As I turned the ignition, Emily spoke again, softer this time. "Mom, do you think Grandma will ever forgive me?" I know she was upset. I looked at her in the rearview mirror. "Your grandmother?" I said. "She's old school, sure, and she was proud of being part of that elite circle. But I saw her shaking her head when you spoke, wiping tears. Proud tears." Emily exhaled. "I hope so. I know so," I promised. "Love doesn't vanish with a harsh moment." She closed her eyes, leaning back. Thank you for standing up for me. I reached into the front seat and grabbed my purse, then reached back to touch her shoulder. Always, sweetheart. The next morning, the newspaper carried a short piece on the wedding, primarily a society column, full of the usual gushing about lace trains and top-shelf wines. But tucked between the florist's glowing review and a brief about the late-night DJ set was an unexpected note. Mother of the bride, Mrs. Annette Becker, delivered an impromptu lesson on the value of education that left many guests rethinking their own biases. A remarkable moment, proving true wisdom often comes in unexpected places. I sipped my coffee, rereading those lines. My stomach fluttered, not with pride, but with an odd kind of wonder. It felt like waking up from a dream to see its imprint in the morning light. Emily sat across from me at our kitchen table, scrolling her phone. She looked up. They quoted you in the online comments. People are using your lines for motivational posts. I laughed. I didn't know I was that quotable. She grinned. Well, you are. I folded the newspaper, setting it aside. It's just a moment, but maybe it'll spark something. She reached for my hand. It already has. I met with my professor today to talk about a scholarship program for first-generation students. She wants me to help organize it. My eyes brightened. That's amazing. Emily's eyes filled with excitement she barely contained. Mom, I thought I might study education policy, become a community organizer or something. I pressed her hand. I think you'd make a wonderful one. A week later, I stopped by Mrs. Whitmore's house to drop off the thank you card. Emily had insisted on. The street was quiet, lined with magnolias and brick walkways. I rang the doorbell, rehearsing my apology for last time in my head. When the door opened, I caught my breath. Mrs. Whitmore stood there in a tailored suit, navy blue, no pearls, hair softly pulled back. She gave me a small, genuine smile. Miss Becker, she greeted. Come in, please. I stepped over the threshold, noting the tasteful decor, sepia-toned wedding portraits, plush carpets, walls lined with family crests. It spoke of old traditions and impeccable breeding. I held out the card. Emily asked me to give you this, and I wanted to say thank you. Mrs. Whitmore's eyes misted. She took the card, clasping it to her chest. Thank you. Your words, they challenged me. I've spent so long following rules, I forgot the reason behind them. I nodded, heart fluttering. We all have our blind spots. She led me to the sitting room, overstuffed armchairs around a coffee table strewn with memoirs and tea. Please, have a seat. She poured tea into delicate china cups and handed me one. The tea smelled faintly of bergamot. We sipped in companionable silence before she spoke again. I was raised to value appearances. Education was proof of status. I never stopped to consider other forms of learning. You showed us that. She met my gaze. I'm sorry I was unkind. I offered a gentle smile. Thank you for saying that. She sighed. I'd like to make it up to you, and Emily. I've arranged for a tour of the university scholarship program I chair. I'd like you both to come as my guests. Her hand fluttered. I think it would do good for you and for me. I blinked, surprised. We'd be honored. She rose, retrieved a small envelope from her purse, and handed it to me. Inside were 2 tickets to a lecture series on non-traditional education pathways. Start with this, she said. That afternoon, I drove home with a gentle warmth in my chest, like the moment you realize a frost has melted. Sometimes bridges really can be rebuilt. Over the following month, Emily and I found ourselves drawn into the world of alternative education circles, workshops on micro-credentialing, panels on equal access initiatives, conversations buzzing with ideas about lifelong learning. We attended the first lecture. A professor from the School of Open Knowledge spoke about education equity and recognizing diverse forms of expertise. In the Kunda, Emily asked, voice steady, how do we convince society, especially gatekeepers who cling to degrees, that real-world learning deserves equal respect? The professor nodded appreciatively. By building examples, programs like your scholarship initiative, mentorship networks, and public forums that showcase success stories. Your generation has the passion to make that change. Afterward, Emily and I lingered, meeting other attendees, a former truck driver turned coding boot camp instructor, a retired nurse who taught community health through YouTube tutorials, a single mother who earned a living selling handcrafted goods while studying economics online. Their stories filled me with hope. On the drive home, Emily circled ideas, I want to invite that coding instructor to speak at our community center, and maybe we can film some of the talks, put them online for free." She glanced at me, eyes shining. "What do you think?" I grinned, feeling the spark of purpose ignite again. "I think we have work to do." Meanwhile, something changed in my own life. Calls came in from former colleagues at the law firm. "We heard about your speech. Do you want to lead a training session on bias in legal hiring?" Another call from the local community college. "Would you speak at our commencement about non-traditional career paths?" Their invitations felt like ripples from my one moment of courage reaching far beyond. At first, I hesitated. My workload as a paralegal was already heavy. Contracts drafting, depositions, court filings stretched my days into evenings. But then I thought of Emily's journey, of Mrs. Whitmore's tea invitation, of every person in that ballroom who had glimpsed the value of life, earned wisdom. If I could help just one person see their worth, I would. So I accepted. My first speaking engagement was at the courthouse library, a modest room with folding chairs and a podium flanked by law books. I spoke about my own path, working to put myself through night school, then breaking into the legal field without a law degree. I talked about the biases paralegals face, being passed over for high-profile cases, assumed to lack expertise. And I shared the lesson I'd taught at Emily's wedding, that education isn't confined to campus. The audience, an earnest mix of junior attorneys, court clerks, and community volunteers, listened raptly, asked questions about mentorship, urged the firm to create formal paralegal training programs. Weeks later, I learned that the firm had launched a structured paralegal advancement initiative, tuition reimbursement, leadership tracks, recognition awards, a small victory, but one I'd never imagined possible. One Saturday morning, Emily and I hosted our first community event at the center, a Show Us Your Skills fair. We set up booths where people could demonstrate everything from graphic design and carpentry to knitting and drone piloting. Local artisans sold their wares, a jazz trio from the community college played in the corner, and families streamed in to explore. We filmed segments for our new YouTube channel, capturing interviews. I learned welding so I could build custom furniture. I taught myself French online. My cooking skills turned into a catering business. By mid-afternoon, the hall buzzed with energy. I watched Emily guide a group of high schoolers through coding exercises on laptops, her patience and enthusiasm shining. I saw Mr. Delaney, the retired nurse, teaching a workshop on basic first aid. And up near the snack table, I spotted Mrs. Whitmore sipping lemonade and chatting with Aunt Muriel, both wearing Show Us Your Skills badges and looking thoroughly impressed. I found them and raised a hand in greeting. Mrs. Whitmore beamed. "I've never seen anything like this," she said. "It's wonderful." She turned to Muriel. "Isn't it?" Aunt Muriel's eyes twinkled. "Absolutely. I learned how to use my phone's camera today, and I'm going to teach Mrs. Whitmore how to knit." They both laughed, and I felt a gentle swell of gratitude. Healing can take time, but shared experiences, new perspectives, and meaningful actions build bridges stronger than any walls of bias. That evening, as I tucked Emily into bed, she sighed happily. "Mom, today was the best day ever." She yawned. "Thank you for believing in me, and for believing in everyone else." I brushed her hair back. "Thank you for giving me the courage to speak up." She turned to face me. "You changed so many lives, starting with mine." I kissed her forehead. "Always, darling. Education is a journey, and we're just getting started." As I switched off the light and closed her door, I paused to reflect. A chance lesson at a wedding had rippled into community change, personal growth, and a network of advocates for lifelong learning. The world was far from perfect. There would always be snobbery, exclusion, and narrow definitions of worth. But that night, in a quiet bedroom, I knew we had struck a significant blow for inclusion. I returned to the living room, where my husband David was reading. He looked up, eyes warm. "How was she?" "She's asleep," I said, joining him on the couch. "And so am I, tired, happy, hopeful." He smiled, wrapping an arm around me. "I'm proud of you." I leaned my head on his shoulder. We did good. As the city lights pulsed outside our window, I closed my eyes, comforted by the knowledge that true education, born of perseverance, empathy, and courage, cannot be measured by diplomas alone. It is taught by example, reinforced by community, and learned in moments both small and grand. And that, above all, is the legacy I and my daughter would continue to build, one unthinkable lesson at a time.